What's up guys, Pretender here, and today I'm here with my first impressions of Phainon. It's been a few days since he did release as I am recording this, and I've done practically nothing but test him with different scenarios and such. Don't have him on my actual account, so unfortunately I had to go by different means to test it. I've tested him at different dupe levels and such, but I'll primarily be talking about the one that I tested most, which is E0S1 and E1S1. So yeah, with that being said, let's just get straight into it. So just like usual, talking about like other first impressions, what I was thinking leading up to his release. So he first got announced, his kit details were going around, and I was like, damn, this character does seem quite busted. He did so many things to the point that I did kind of question if he was going to actually be really good, because it just felt like he just had a bunch of info and a bunch of stuff in his kit, but not really actually doing anything proper. If there was something I was overlooking, because there was just so much info, because he had enhanced basic attack, enhanced skill, enhanced counter, which was also skill, go into the transform, be able to dispel it, all that kind of stuff. My main concerns were the fact that this was considered extra turns and was scaling off his base speed. His multipliers were completely fine. Their multipliers are really high, up to 1,000 plus with the meteor. It is balanced, so it's a bit annoying, but it's still really high. But nonetheless, his multipliers overall are still very good. He has very, very good survivability in his actual ultimate, so he doesn't really need help with a sustain. My main issues were once again the fact that the extra turns scaled off base speed, and also kind of the fact that you did end up departing everyone on your team, which made it to where he actually would not be able to get rebuff, which he doesn't really need. But also for the fact that it kills synergy with sub DPSs and such, it's only really like one instance that kind of works. And then as someone who does like to go for 0 cycles and such, I was kind of scared to see how it did tie into a cycle. Since if you do transform with him, often the extra turns will actually lead up into the second cycle. You would need stuff like defeating enemies with his E1, his light cone, which increases base speed, all that stuff. So Phainon also did have a up and down beta cycle. He got buffed in some aspects, got nerfed, and he had like a really weird, super big base attack nerf, which was gonna be really sad if they kept that, because my god, his damage would have been so much lower, because base attack is super important. Since, base attack is what all this extra attack percent stuff multiply off of, because it's the whole thing and how the formula works. So having a lower base attack would mean he's not going to have that high of an attack stat, less damage you would do overall. So it was kind of an up and down. At this point, I was pretty much considered to get him just because, I am a Honkai 3rd player, or I was at least, so Kevin was one of the characters I was super excited for in this game. We were finally getting him, but again, with these kit issues and stuff, I was kind of like, I will wait till what they actually end up doing to make my decision. Worst case, he might be a character I just get for collection. And during his beta cycle, I got to actually, test him myself as well through different means. And it did end up turning out that my actual worries for him were actual problems. The fact that the only way you could actually increase the speed of his extra turns was by his E1 with the speed inheritance ratio, especially after V5 and such. And then his light cone, which increased base speed, was a bit worrying, because sometimes you wouldn't be able to push out all these actual turns before the cycle ended, which resulted in not getting a 0 cycle. And then I had a new issue that did kind of come up, is if you can't kill within that first ultimate and you go out of it, you might be too slow to actually rebuild it. There are setups where you can very much build it for a second time before the turn ends, and you can go into it and maybe get 1 or 2 more extra turns before the cycle ends. But for the most part, if you weren't able to kill it in that first one, it was kind of like, yikes. Another thing I didn't like is, I know I'm a sustainless enjoyer, but the fact that running a sustain actually just decimates his output is actually crazy. I'm not saying running a sustain is bad, especially for people that, aren't like me who care about 0 cycles and stuff, but like it actually impacts his damage by a lot. Especially since, supports in this game, they are crazy good. Crazy attack buffs, crazy access to true damage, crazy access to damage down. There's a lot of stuff that supports provide nowadays that is super important. So obviously, with other characters, sustainless is going to be a big damage jump, but with other characters, you can still very much run a sustain and still have pretty easy 0 cycles, such as look at like a Nox or the Herda. They have low cost with sustain clears, not including the HP drain characters, because obviously you really kind of need a sustain with them except meta. But yeah, a lot of characters in the game, you can very much do low cost cycle clears with the sustain and so on. I'm not really talking about low cost here, I'm really just talking about like, average 6+ cost. But yeah, Phainon's damage like significantly drops when you don't have that triple support. And funny enough, I was watching my friend use them at one point, and his Phainon was like E4 at the time. He was testing around different teams, having fun too, and then he's like, yo, what if I take Phainon with him? Takes Phainon with him, and the damage drop off was so insane. Both him and Mia were like, yeah, yikes. Again, I'm not saying that it's bad or anything. For a lot of people, they will be running a sustain, because you guys are probably not like me who really care about 0 cycles and stuff. So taking the sustain will lower his damage output, but you still can clear over the time of multiple cycles because that's probably what you're going for anyways. But for someone like me who primarily focuses on the 0 cycle. So when he did release, he still ended up having these issues where, you know, the speed you can get only being off base speed or the E1 inheritance ratio was still just kind of a problem. Especially in battles where you might not have too many enemies, so you can't really kill, and then the E1 effect is kind of whatever. And then sometimes you weren't able to actually kill the actual wave or the full MLC cycle within that one ultimate. And so you have to spend time getting a second one, and by the time you get the second one, you might only have one action that still might not kill, and so on. And then another thing I didn't really like is the fact that you can't really get any extra forms of DPS output. The only way you can actually have anything work is zones. Like Tribi, if you have Tribi ult up, you're still able to do the true damage from your E1 and such, which is a big damage upgrade for him. I don't see many people talk about it. I get it, like Tribi can't do her attack stuff and stuff. She can't target Phainon for charges and all that, but it's still insane how much of a difference E1 Tribi makes on the team. Tribi plus Sunday for me consistently makes him actually able to 0 cycle just because the sheer damage output he does get. But yeah, I think that's definitely an underrated thing. I know a lot of people dismiss Tribi just because you can't target and all that stuff and she can get her follow-up attacks. While that may be true and is very fair, it's still a big damage output. That does get increased overall. So yeah, only zones really being able to affect it. So you can't really take any sub DPS forms and do setups like that. Like Cypher, with her existing on the field, it doesn't really do anything because she's not on the field anymore. The only plus side about Cypher is the actual thing you get, her tally accumulation, does work in Phainon's ultimate, but you'd have to exit Phainon's ultimate to kill with Cypher, which, you know, you're probably running a lower cycle team with that anyways. And then I mentioned Tribi follow-up attacks, that kind of stuff, any other form of follow-up attacks, any form of sub DPS. Since you depart everyone, you're not able to get any extra damage output. Since these extra damage outputs add up throughout the battle, which is going to help you get a kill that you normally wouldn't. That's why Tribi follow-up attacks sometimes doesn't seem too much, but you gotta remember, this is going off multiple times and is wiggling down enemies that is going to kill, otherwise what wouldn't. So being able to lose synergies with, you know, sub DPS stuff and existing on the field, unless it's a zone buffing his damage, everything kind of just has to buff him to make everything work. And then, yeah, again, the whole issue, if you can't kill in that first ultimate, it's bad. If you're doing sustain list, you're very susceptible to dying. If you don't have a proper setup, you might not even get ultimate fast enough. And overall, for a 0 cycle clear, it's still definitely possible. I'm not saying as a 0 cycler it's impossible. You still definitely can with certain setups and certain playstyles and all that stuff. But it's going to be not as good as other characters. But when you do factor in a more casual side, so if you're just someone that, you know, you just want to clear within 5 cycles because you only really need 5 cycles and 5 cycles, then he's insane. He's absolutely incredible. In his ult, you practically don't have to worry about dying. You're able to run a sustain, which again is a damage drop off, but it'll be safe for when you do exit his ultimate. You do the damage in his ultimate, you probably get the second wave and a certain amount. He resets, you go back in, and with the sustain keeping you alive, you're able to cycle through and get it again. And he's also very, very, very easy to use. So it's not like you have to do anything specific, you know, timing the counters. It's pretty, like, playing itself. You don't have to play out your mind to get a good clear. Unless, again, you're going for a high cycle, but in this case, for an average one. When it comes to just clearing within a certain amount of cycles, it's completely fine. Phainon is great. So, at least on that side, when it doesn't come to, you know, super, super high cycles and stuff, 0 cycling, maybe even 1 cycling. With 1 cycle, he's a lot better anyways. But yeah, when it comes to 0 cycling and you kind of ignore that, and then you just go to clearing in any amount of cycles, he's fantastic. Simple to use, simple to get an ult, especially throughout a longer duration of battle, because you don't care about getting it quick. And at least on the right side, he is still practically able to use any support. It would have been absolutely devastating if he somehow managed to be this kind of archetype and also be like an HP scaler or something. Because then you can't use stuff like Robin and stuff. You still will be able to use stuff, but you can't also use Ting Yun and such. Because Ting Yun's also one of his best partners right now. So at least on the bright side, even if you're using characters that can't target him, he still benefits from the buffs. Robin ult with a big attack increase, you know, all that kind of stuff. Tribi E1 increases damage like a lot, like I was talking about earlier. Is a lot that can go on. So I definitely think, as a 0 cycle perspective, I don't really like everything. It is fun to try to figure out how to 0 cycle in certain situations, but sometimes it just doesn't work. But when it comes to clearing anything past that, like again 3, 4, 5 cycles and stuff, he is absolutely insane. For anyone that isn't going for high cycles, you will love Phainon. He's super easy to use, super easy to pilot, and his overall performance is great. So my first impressions is, you know, kind of split. On a me side that goes for 0 cycles, I'm not the biggest fan. I don't think I would end up investing so much on this team as opposed to something else. But when it comes to a point where I'm looking in the views of someone that doesn't care about 0 cycles, then this would be great. As long as you're able to have him proper build support, he is going to clear very consistently and probably for a long time with the way he works. Able to always get a good cycle clear. and performs very well. Vertical investment on him is also great. S1 is a big jump with the base speed. E1 makes it to where he can get even faster at least. E2, he practically becomes a lot better. The more you invest in him, the better he does become for Zero Cycles as well. With E2, it's a lot more possible because you get the extra turns. I didn't really test it past that because I was not going to go for E4 or E6 at all. I myself don't think I would end up pulling right now just because of the Fate collab. I definitely think I would get Phainon just to have him and just to have fun with him. But right now, unfortunately, I do think I'm going to end up skipping unless I get really lucky with Fate. Then I'll go back and I will end up getting him and his Lycon probably. Will I get any dupes? I don't know. But yeah, again, first impressions on a Zero Cycle perspective, not the greatest, not the biggest fan, probably wouldn't go crazy for. On any other perspective, very good. Performs well in every mode, a bit less in Pure Fiction, but he still does perform a lot better in Pure Fiction than most people say. He's still able to get a good clearable score. In Apocalyptic Shadow, he's able to also get a very good score, especially when you can get that bounce meteor to only hit one person in Apocalyptic Shadow. But in Pure Fiction, he still does have good output, especially since you can use this counter to make everyone act and hit them all. And since there's always 5+ enemies on the field, you're able to get like the full effect pretty much. So I definitely think overall he does perform well. But yeah, that does end my personal first impressions. Let me know if you guys also have first impressions of what you guys do think about him so far. Feel free to comment and discuss below, and I'll see you later. Peace out.